Recorded. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to bother you. Okay. So let me close this down.
Okay, so hopefully we've gotten this straightened out here. I have no idea why it works in my office. Okay, so now we go back to the cyber campus and www.cuk.ac.kr and okay, and we go English and we go cyber campus, we go log in and it asks me stupid thing and then I put in this here. Okay, so far so good. And we go here, and Europe. I wish it was in English. Make it in English. How do you make it in English here? Where? Oh, okay, there you go. Thank you. And we go to attendance. And I think we're now still in week 2. So add smart attendance is 573. 573 is your smart attendance number. And 573. And so we go back here and we go chat. And we go 573. Okay, 573 is the is your smart attendance number. Your smart attendance number. All right, so now I have to open up my files here and go here. And let me see if I can do this without too much trouble. And it is kind of trouble. Okay, and then we go here, and Kingston, and then we go here, and then we see my files, and like that, and we go lesson plan, hooray, lesson plan, and let's see how long this takes to open, and here we are, the lesson plan. Okay, so there was some other information I was going to share, just the intro for the YouTube video I was going to show you, but that's not really that critical. So somebody was mentioning about what about the notes, and they want to highlight that we should talk about the notes. And so let's make sure that we look at the notes here for chapter 3, since we're now starting on chapter 3, discussing the concept of Europeanization, concept theory and methods. And the idea of Europeanization has directed much of the field of European studies, particularly in the research areas of domestic change in the EU member states, and in administration and public policy, and in party politics, and in identity, and in governance architecture, and intra-institutional relations, and the trajectory of European integration. And the impacts or externalities of the European Union on candidate countries and partner states. So candidate countries include, for example, countries that have applied to join the European Union and are officially candidates. And so negotiations are beginning with them or have continued with them to join. So do you have any example? Do you know of any examples of countries that have applied to join the European Union that are not yet in the European Union? Yeah, they've applied officially, their application has officially been accepted to begin negotiations, right? So there's lots of formal benchmarks or steps that the European Union likes to adopt. I think for a number of reasons, including a desire to give people hope that, oh, we're making progress. So we all know, for example, let's take an example, the Republic of North Macedonia. The Republic of North Macedonia. Their application to join the European Union has not yet officially been accepted. The application, when it's accepted, it simply begins the process of beginning the negotiation. So the Republic of North Macedonia is not yet a candidate country to join the European Union. And that acceptance of North Macedonia's application will formally begin the negotiation process for the Republic of North Macedonia to join the European Union. So just to show you the problems or the complexities that these countries face particularly in like North Macedonia. North Macedonia, let me show you some maps from the time of the Balkan Wars, highlighting some of the problems or challenges of North Macedonia in joining the European Union. Let me make sure that we're sharing the screen. So go here, go back to share screen and show this. So here is a map from the time of the Balkan Wars. This is a French map. So you see it says Macedon. Yeah, the American University in Bulgaria, where I was before coming here, was literally right here in Blagoevgrad, the town of Blagoevgrad, named after the founder of the Bulgarian Communist Party, Dimitar Blagoev. And the name was renamed Blagoevgrad at the end of the World War II when communism came to Bulgaria. The city was previously named Gorna Jumaya. Gorna Jumaya is a mix of Slavic language and Turkish Arabic language. So it means high market town. And the Bulgarians, being the Bulgarian nationalists that the Bulgarian Communist Party came to represent, thought that old name for Blagoevgrad, for that town, was too Turkish sounding, sounded too much like Turkish. So they changed the name to Blagoevgrad. But you can see here that in Macedonia, there's lots of population that live in this area that are Albanians. So this is reflecting the Albanian ethnic group in this area. About 70% of Albanians are Muslim. The other 30% are Orthodox and Catholic. So you know Mother Teresa, who was I think she's now a saint, who worked in India for many years. She was a Catholic Albanian who worked in India with the poor. Mother Teresa. You can look her up on Wikipedia. And these are Macedonians, are more people that are generally Slavic. They speak a language that's very close to Bulgarian. I can understand Macedonian. It's very close to Bulgarian. And there are about 2 million people, a little over 2 million people live here, and about 2/3 are Slavic speakers, Macedonian language first speakers, and the others are Albanians, and they generally often do not like each other. And this you see up here, of course, is Kosovo, which is now recognized as a separate country from Serbia that was separated through war over 20 years ago, with NATO launching its first military campaign against Serbia in 1999 to force Serbia to withdraw the Serbian army from this autonomous region of Serbia, this autonomous province, Kosovo. And then you see also some Albanians here in Montenegro, or another country that recently joined NATO, only having 700 or 800,000 people in total living here. They joined NATO a few years ago. You can check, I think it was 2015, or when Donald Trump was president, they joined NATO. And so it was more recent than 2015. I have to go back and check. And then here is Albania itself. And here you see Greek minority in this area here. So this country wants to join, has been renamed the Republic of North Macedonia, because there was disputes between Greece and Macedonia over the name Macedonia, because Greeks claim that this name implies that all of this territory should be part of Macedonia as well, because that's traditional part of Macedonia is this area plus this area and this area, going into Bulgaria and northern Greece, that this is all part of traditional Macedonia. So after many years of negotiation, Macedonia finally agreed to adopt the name North Macedonia. So in other words, it's just part of Macedonia. We all recognize it is just the Republic of North Macedonia. It's not claiming this territory, where we also know that there are many people who speak Slavic language here. This is quite difficult and unpleasant history that we will cover in the class when you read the chapter in the book on Greece. There's a chapter in the book on Greece, and there's some brief reference to the Greek Civil War. Right at the end of the Second World War, there was a war in Greece between the communists and the monarchists supporting the king, and the Greek Civil War was instigated by Tito's, well, supported by Tito's communist Yugoslavia. This all used to be part of Yugoslavia. And encouraging these people, the Slavic minority in northern Greece, to rise up as part of the Greek Communist Party uprising, aiming ultimately to add Greece to this Balkan confederation that was crushed with the help of the CIA, the American CIA, and the British military. They supported the Greek government covertly and overtly in giving them military aid to crush the rebellion in this region. So, you know, there's of course a Wikipedia entry for the Greek Civil War, and I think you can read more about it if you would like, but let me tell you why this is important. In the coverage of the conflict in Ukraine, it strikes me how nationalism is such a powerful force because it's relating to people's identity. And you know what? Professors are human beings too. You know what I forgot? I forgot the chocolate. I should have brought the chocolate. Okay, but professors are human beings too. And my professor, when I was at the University of Pittsburgh in graduate school, he once told me something. He said that when you're reading about the Arab-Israeli conflict and you're studying the Arab-Israeli conflict between the Arabs and Israel, when you read studies by Israeli political scientists, he said you have to view that material as not as social science, but as primary sources. In other words, they're presenting the Israeli nationalist perspective on the Arab-Israeli conflict. Even when you're reading Israeli political scientists who claim, like me, that we are not controlled by our emotions, our identity, we are focused upon analyzing human political behavior the way we are analyze the behavior of any other type of animal. And we're not ourselves influenced and controlled in our thinking, in our analysis by our own deep emotional identity needs. We'd like to believe that. But he said in the case of the Arab-Israeli conflict, when you read Israeli political scientists writing upon the conflict with the Arabs, you have to view it as what's called primary sources. Sources from participants in the conflict that have taken a side, that have taken a position. And they're, again, we were talking about the power of nationalism. You got a sense of it. You know how it is because and when I was mentioning the Alamo in Texas and how Mexico views the United States and how the United States stole half of Mexico 160 years ago in the Mexican War. So, and you know, when I'm reading about, when I listen over the last 2 months, Ukrainian political scientists talking on Zoom from Harvard or University of Illinois, because everything is now on Zoom, all of these seminars, it's the same thing. It's the same point. When I hear Ukrainian political scientists speak, their primary sources, they are so intensely committed to Ukrainian identity and self-determination that they are the point is that they're not primarily interested in peaceful conflict resolution. They want to win. They want independence from Russia, even if that means lots of terrible suffering. Peaceful conflict resolution is not their primary driver. Their primary driver is freedom for Ukraine, to be emotional about it. And this is very important because we have thousands of nuclear weapons available for use by Russia, in the US, in other countries in Europe, in the middle of this Europe where this violence is going on and people becoming intensely polarized, filled with hatred and fear and disgust. And the reason I want to mention this is because when you read the chapter, for example, on Greece in this book, I think there's maybe one minor reference in that chapter to the Greek Civil War. The chapter on Greece is written by Greek professors. Look at their names. I think it's one of the same professors here that's writing the chapter on your reading for this week. And these people feel intensely emotional about this. They feel intensely emotional about these issues. And so one of the ways by which to deal with that is part of human nature is to not talk about the most controversial and sensitive and emotional topics. But there's a subtext, an unspoken element, in other words, in these chapters whereby the legacy of the Greek Civil War is important for understanding why, for example, the Greek state today is so weak. You're going to read about how corrupt the Greek state is. Terrible problems with corruption. People don't pay their taxes in Greece, generally speaking. You want to get something done, you have to bribe people in the government. And part of the reason is because the Greek state has not been allowed to develop, I would suggest, in terms of its full self-expression of the people in Greece coming to view themselves as part of a national community and the Greek authorities representing the national community, in part because of the intervention during the Greek Civil War. And despite being in the European Union since 1980s, Greece is still one of the most corrupt countries in the European Union, or had been until finally the financial crisis that emerged 13 years ago, or 12 years ago in 2009, 2010, when the Greeks were simply lying, giving us completely wrong information about how big, for example, their budget deficits were. Their statistics were completely useless. And so that's a theme throughout this book, that these people are talking about Europeanization as a way by which to resolve the resentments and hostilities between Britain and Greece and the United States, because everybody knows that the British and the United States intervened in that civil war in Greece. And the CIA and the British military helped suppress the Greek communists because of the belief that the Greek communists were working for Moscow. They were working for Joseph Stalin, and that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Hitler's Germany, that the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin wanted to do what Germany under Hitler tried and failed to do. But the Soviet Union is much more powerful. The Soviet Union won the Second World War. The Soviet Union is much more dangerous because it has a more appealing ideology. Socialism, socialism, socialism. Take the money from the rich aristocrats and monarchists in Greece and give them to the poor, to the peasants, in the name of social justice. Socialism, socialism. That will save and solve our problems. Instead of poor people living such poor, poverty-stricken lives, we will copy the Soviet Union and do the amazing things in Greece, in Italy, and in France that the communists did in the Soviet Union. taking power in the midst of the First World War, the terrible death and destruction of the First World War, and then the Russian Civil War that killed millions more, and then the Soviet Union became a superpower under Stalin and industrialized their state under socialism. Socialism, look what socialism created in the Soviet Union, industrializing that country, defeating Nazi Germany, occupying half of Europe, and including defeating and occupying Hitler and occupying Berlin. Socialism is the answer for our underdevelopment. Socialism will make us strong and prosperous. And the Americans were terrified that Greeks and Mexicans and Iranians and peoples in Africa and in Latin America would go, yeah, socialism is the answer. And in Korea and in Vietnam, that yeah, socialism is the answer. And so the Americans fought and implemented the strategy of containment. You had to contain communism. And that meant do whatever was necessary to crush the fighters of communist guerrilla war, crush the military threat from communists and communism in Greece, in Korea, in Vietnam. And yeah, Franco was a bad guy, but after World War II, Franco's not so bad because after all, he's anti-communist. So yeah, sure, he was a fascist. Sure, he gave us this. You know, the fascist salute came from, was first implemented on a mass scale by Franco in Spain. But hey, he kills communists, so he's not so bad. So there was an unofficial alliance between Franco and the United States after the Second World War. And then pour vast amounts of American aid and assistance into Greece, into Spain, into South Korea, into Japan, into Western Europe, to develop their economies and make them economically prosperous and therefore hopefully politically stable against the feared communist global threat to try to create a global communist empire under the control of Moscow. That was the American view, and that was the American justification for doing bad things, like in Greece, like allying with Franco. You know, there's this Catholic tradition, right? Catholic legal theory of just war. You can commit a lesser evil if it is necessary to avoid a greater evil. So sometimes you have to fight a war, and you have to kill people in war. But if it's necessary to prevent Joseph Stalin from becoming ruler of all of Europe, and then maybe the world, it's not our fault. The Americans said, it's Moscow's fault for trying to spread communism in Spain and in Mexico and in Cuba and in Korea and in Vietnam. And because, of course, the communists are vicious and nasty. And look what Stalin did to his own people. My God! What will happen if Stalin takes control of Mexico or Spain or Italy or Greece? So that was the justification that the Americans used, and it's why basically you're here in this classroom today. South Korea is a creation of the Cold War. That we have to stop the communists wherever they attempt to expand, because if they take South Korea, the communists are not going to stop in South Korea. They're going to take Japan, like they took China, and they're going to take Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and then they're going to take all of Southeast Asia, and they're going to take India, and then they're going to take Africa, and then they'll take the Europe, and then ultimately they will eventually dominate the world and control the Western Hemisphere, North and South America as well. So there's that subtext, and it's not just a history lesson, boys and girls, because that's critically important for the present in understanding the conflict in Ukraine today. See, the Americans believe, rightly or wrongly, that the Americans and their friends saved the world from communist totalitarianism. That the United States and its allies in the European Union saved the world from a Russian version of Nazi Germany trying to conquer the world. And that Vladimir Putin wants to recreate that communist empire and bring back that Russian version of Nazi Germany. And that's the dominant, not the only, but that's the prevailing view in Washington. And from what I'm hearing in Europe today, in the European Union rhetoric coming out today about how to deal with Putin. Of course, the Russians may not view the Soviet Union and the Cold War from 1948 to 1991 as basically driven by Moscow's desire to dominate the world. They might view themselves as having been under threat from capitalism and directed from Washington and London. They themselves may have viewed the Cold War as a desire to contain them, the Americans, the British, and their allies who wanted to destroy the Soviet Union and the communist regime in the Soviet Union. That might well be a dominant or prevailing view in Moscow today. So that means that Moscow might not view the European Union and NATO as such wonderful beneficiaries for the human race, because they don't believe that the Cold War was due to a Russian desire to dominate and control the world. So so this isn't just a history lesson, but I mean, I'm talking about this now because it's so critical as I read or hear just what's coming out of the media. Again, the gloating, about how the Russians are finding more resistance in Ukraine than they expected, about how Vladimir Putin wants to recreate the Soviet Empire. This is highly dangerous. This is very dangerous situation we're in right now. Because of course, I don't think Vladimir Putin and his supporters view themselves as wanting to dominate the old Soviet Union and dominate and recreate the Russian Empire. They believe that Ukraine is Russian, the way Jewish nationalists view Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem is part of Jewish national identity. The way Serbs view Kosovo as their cradle of their civilization. This is where Serbia began. And the fact that those Albanians moved there and took over because they have children like rats. I mean, the ugly stereotypes of these peoples being backward and the like. But the point is that this is the essence of nationalism, and the prevailing view in the United States is that Vladimir Putin wants to try to do again what the old Soviet Union supposedly tried to do: conquer the world, or at least dominate much of the world for Moscow, when it might well be a defensive motivation to defend Russian national identity with the supposed cradle of Russian civilization supposedly lying in Kiev. And that the European Union and NATO are trying to take that heart of the Russian nation out of the Russian nation and make it into a pro-American regime dominated by intense, militant Ukrainian nationalists that despise Russians. To make those people into Ukrainians in the territory of Ukraine, in those artificial boundaries, supposedly, that Lenin and Stalin created in the 1920s for their own reasons, 100 years ago, that those boundaries now are going to be the creation of a new anti-Russian entity, state, that's going to take the heart of the Russian nation away from Russia through the attraction of NATO and the European Union. That's what I've been thinking about. So, okay, but that again, that's the context. And again, this is tragic, and I keep coming back to these points. But the reason I keep coming back to these points is because this book that you're reading this semester is trying to understand the European Union's role in how does it affect the development, the political development of Spanish nationals, Italian nationals, the Italian nation state, the Spanish state, the French state, the Greek state, the Bulgarian state, the Polish state. What does Europeanization mean? keeping in mind it was created right after the end of the Second World War to try to prevent World War III. And now there's people talking about nuclear war, World War III, as we're sitting here right now, here in 2022. So, all right, so we're trying to understand what is the impact of European integration on the nation states and the states of Europe. And one of the dominant theoretical frameworks for understanding how the European Union works and functions is not to ignore nationalism, but to understand that the rulers in France and Spain and Italy and Greece today are Democrats. They're liberal Democrats, but they also represent nationalistic peoples, people that are proud, generally speaking, to be Italians, to be French, to be Germans, to be Spanish, to be Greeks, to be Poles. But they are also liberals, liberal Democrats. And these liberal democratic authorities in Greece, in Germany, particularly in Germany and France, they understand or accept that they need to cooperate with each other in order to achieve their various political objectives. And their objectives include staying in power and keeping new Hitlers out of power, new Mussolinis out of power, stabilizing their regimes, and also providing for the prosperity and dignity for their nations in the world as it exists, but apparently within the framework of American hegemony. And that means they need to cooperate. So this rise of liberal intergovernmentalism as a framework for understanding European integration, it has become dominant over the last, I would say, 30 years. That European institutions are important, but European institutions just make it easier for the liberal authorities, the post-World War II liberal authorities in what is the European Union today, to be able to cooperate, communicate, and coordinate and collaborate. 4 C's: communicate, collaborate, cooperate, and coordinate. The European Union makes it easier for these nations of Europe, at least the ones in the European Union, to collaborate, coordinate, cooperate, and communicate with each other. And that's the essence of liberal governmentalism. Again, you have to look at the internal politics of these countries to understand how European integration develops, because the internal politics of these countries is driven by domestic needs of different German groups in Germany, different French groups in France, different Spanish groups in Spain, different Italian groups within Italy, and they utilize the European Union institutions to achieve their domestically shaped and dominated objectives, respectively. Italian groups in Italy, German groups in Germany, French groups in France, and so on. So how does that communication, collaboration, coordination, cooperation itself impact Europeans in terms of their political attitudes and thinking? That's a primary issue as well. That the fact that you're always communicating, blah, 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 with each other, collaborating, coordinating, and cooperating with each other, that should have some kind of impact on your understanding of what it means to be a German in Europe today, or an Italian, or a Spaniard, or a Catalonian, or a Greek, or a Bulgarian. It should affect your understanding of what it means over the months, years, and decades of what it means to be a German in Germany as part of the European integration for 70 years now. You understand? Right? So how have people attempted to approach that topic? Trying to understand the European Union in terms of governing all of Europe, supranational governance, right? Multi-level governance, how we understand Europeans try to govern their affairs, not just at the national level, but also at this European Union level, the local level, and the national level, all simultaneously while trying to pursue their objectives. That has been one approach that has been adopted. Trying to understand the new institutional variations within the European Union itself as they've developed and changed. I mean, the European Union has changed so much in the last, we don't even need to talk about what happened since 2008. Just looking at what has happened last 2 years. Just in the last 2 years, the European Union is now issuing Eurobonds. I mean, the book highlights, I think I don't know if it's in this book, but in the other book I was using for the European Union policymaking class, as recently as spring 2020, spring 2019, as recently as 2019, the German government was saying 3 years ago, we're not going to issue Eurobonds. Now, in the last year, the European Union is issuing hundreds of billions of Eurobonds on behalf of Europe, the way Germany issues gilts, German bonds, for the German government to cover its budget deficit, or the Italian government, or the Greek government. The Germans have agreed that the European Union should now be issuing Eurobonds. So that means the European Central Bank is becoming more and more powerful. Even as we speak, the European Commission is becoming more and more powerful. Over the last year, 12 months, the European Commission has gotten the capacity to sell Eurobonds, supported with the European Central Bank. I mean, the changes that are going on in Europe are tremendous. And now we have this war in Ukraine, and it's not even mentioned in your book, but now we're seeing discussions in Europe about strengthening the military component, the military and security European institutions for overseeing the purchasing and distribution of weapons, of military supplies, military equipment for European soldiers in some kind of coordinated method that probably will not be called your European Union Army, but will become some kind of integrated European structure that will maintain some formal French and Spanish and German and Italian differentiation. But again, there will be a higher level focus on purchasing and developing military technology and purchasing equipment away from the German or Italian or French level, and giving more of that authority to European Union bodies to oversee the European contracting, development and contracting and purchasing of equipment for all European militaries. And that's happening right now. Even in, for example, in the European Union, providing arms to the Ukrainians to fight the Russians. That's from 3 days ago. And of course, you know how the Russians are responding, right? They're bombing Western Ukraine. They're dropping bombs 15 kilometers from the border with Poland. Just this morning, they killed 35 people at a base close to the Polish border in Western Ukraine, very close, literally like 15 kilometers, and killed 35 people because the European Union and the Americans are transferring weapons through that area into Ukraine to go use to fight and kill Russians, for the Ukrainians to be armed. So of course, in this terrible conflict and where people are dying, the Russians have responded by bombing that military base. It's just this news this morning. They killed 35 people at that base, literally just 15 kilometers from the border with Poland. Very dangerous situation, very dangerous. I mean, keep in mind, Russians are human beings too. You're killing their soldiers. They said, you're going to arm those fascists, they claim. They're legitimate targets, those suppliers and those fighters who are coming in to fight and kill Russians. Legitimate targets, and they're killing them. So we're waiting to see what the US and European Union are going to do now. So network governance, how do pan-European networks emerge is another focus. How important is it for European students, particularly such a strong focus on the European authorities to try to co-opt people like you, your age, that the youth are the future of Europe. Old people like me, we're set in our ways. We were born a long time ago, and so we're solidly more likely to be Germans or French or Italians. And you may feel Catalonian, you may feel Spanish, young woman, but you also are probably more likely to feel more European, particularly since we have really emphasized the ability of any young person to go study at a university anywhere in the European Union. That as part of the Erasmus program, that, what is your name again? Huh? Gloria. Gloria, as a citizen of Sardinia, has the. I keep mentioning, you're not Spanish. You're Italian, living in Sardinia. See, but she has the right. Gloria has the right to go study anywhere at any university in the 27 member states of the European Union, and she has to be treated just like any other student. She can go to Germany, and has to be treated in the same way as a German student is treated by the German government in terms of funding, tuition. In Germany, for example, I think students in Germany still do not pay tuition. They do not pay money to study at the German university. They have to buy their own food, and they have to have their own place to live, but they don't pay tuition. So if Gloria wants to go study at a German university, she can go, and she is treated just like a German student in Germany, or in Italy, or in Spain, or in Bulgaria, or in Poland. And hundreds of thousands of European students, college students, benefit from the Erasmus program. Will that make people like Gloria more, Catalonian, Sardinian, Italian, but also more European in their outlook? That's the hope. And so to create these networks of education and governance from people's experience, right? That's also part of this focus upon the impact and the transformative power of Europeanization and policy transfer mechanisms. How do countries in Europe learn from each other? That's very, very important, right? It's not just European Union institutions, but again, like we said at the previous class, right? It is making it easier to be more transparent, to facilitate communication, collaboration, coordination, and cooperation. So if the the best example, again, Spain. Spain is highlighted in the chapter on Spain. Spain under Franco never had an environmental policy. They didn't have a policy for protecting the environment under the dictatorship in Spain. So when Spain came to join the European Union, they had to adopt an environmental policy, and they could look at and examine all of the policies of the European Union member states to pick and choose and adopt best practice. Yeah. This is the European Union class. The American politics class starts at 10 o'clock. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that is easier. It's facilitated by European integration that you don't have to be nervous. I'm a German. Do we really want to learn from those French people? Oh, of course we want to learn from the French people. We want to learn from the Italians. We want to learn from the other member states of Europe. What is the best way? What is best practice? Policy transfer mechanisms, right? Observing, and analyzing and adopting common European practices that the member states adopt as common European best practice. And that becomes much easier in the European framework, in the European context where people and nations are hopefully not suspicious and concerned that we don't want to be under too much influence from those nasty French because the French have been mean to us for so long. No, people don't think that way, or not supposed to think that way today. Although, having said that, there is resistance in Eastern Europe, in Poland and Hungary, for example, about copying, Germany's LGBTQ laws, or copying the human rights laws that the European Union has adopted because of the rise of conservative nationalism. Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. Hopefully I understand how this works now. So we have to end our class, and that's it for today. So I apologize for the delay. Hopefully I will get this figured out. And so we have to stop here. So bye everybody.